Great. Yeah. So I'm going to quickly run through Antidote, the project, but uh, as part of Antidote, we've developed a framework for how to tell collective action stories in ways that land with broad audiences. I'll explain what that is, and we will then kind of give that to each of you to try and use on either your own projects or projects you know of to see what you think of it and then give feedback. But I'm going to share my screen and just dive through a very quick overview of what Antidote is. So just let me know, can you see this when it's loading?
Where are you, Matt? Where in the world are you based?
I'm in Bristol, so in the
UK.
nexus of change in the southwest, but you know, change is happening everywhere. But yeah, let me know when this has come up. It's taking a second to load. If it doesn't, I'll just share without. I'll just share it without the slideshow.
There we go. Great.
It's that.
Yeah.
It's just the slideshow is not working, so I'll just make it as big as I can. But yeah, so my background, I'm a filmmaker, and my background is in shareable stories. That's a crazy thing. I spent a long time making viral campaigns, which is a mad thing to do with your life. But the two things that fascinate me are how the stories we share shape the culture we live in, and why some stories get shared more than others. Like, how can we create stories that have a higher chance than average of being passed on? I've done lots of crazy things, like make viral films that involve lots of bombast. But since 2019, I've only been doing that to focus on issues that are of significant importance to climate or mental health or equality. But even doing that for a few years, one of the things that became really present for me was nobody was hiring me to use these skills to paint any kind of visionary picture of the future we could have or explain any of the amazing stuff that was positive that was going on already. It was often don't do this, stop doing that, do less of that. And that's really important work, and I still do some of that, but it felt after a few years of only doing that that there was a real missing half of the story, and probably the more important half, as all of you on this call I'm sure would agree. So I set out to try and work out how we could share collective action stories of things that were already happening, very much in the vibe of this group, but in ways that land powerfully with ordinary people. And I'll be honest, when I first started doing that, it didn't go very well. We got some funding during the pandemic to tell collective action stories from the recovery of COVID-19. And it was really difficult. We found great stories. They had great characters. They were doing amazing work, but they didn't really cut through. And so for a while, I just focused on other things. But then there was this feeling in me that these are the most important stories, that the way we can come together and express our collective creativity is our most powerful attribute as a species. And if we can't work out how to tell these stories in ways that land, that is a real problem. So I came back to it and have spent the last 3.5 years working through why that didn't work the first time and how we could make it work better. So that's the spirit that has born this project, Antidote. And I guess part of the ethos behind it is that from all the other work we do in that more traditional communications around climate and other issues space, we have the majority feeling that most people know there's a problem, and really what they're doing is either turning away from the problem or looking at it but not sure what to do. And so the most common question we get asked is, what can I do, not what is it or what's going on. And I guess the ethos behind this is that if separation is the problem, if we expose people to those issues, we get that creativity that I'm sure everyone on this call would agree with, that comes out naturally out of humans when they come and work together. And community action is the most powerful lever because we're not inherently asking permission of others. So the spirit we're trying to capture is this don't ask, just do spirit. I'm going to go quickly because this is all probably kind of bread and butter for everyone on this call. But so Antidote is developed as a platform to help us rediscover our collective power. And one of the things we've found doing that is, I'm sure all of us on this call feel the power of this, but not everyone in society does. And we when we started trying to tell these stories, we got a bit of backlash. We got some people who felt we were being utopian. They felt we were kind of naive. They felt that we weren't really clear on how the world worked. And so we
Hey
had to
Google,
work out how we could
timer 20 minutes.
So what we're trying to do is work out how we can share, how we can move people from this idea on the left where community stories are boring, community feels small, and even when we do tell them well, we're so individualized that we kind of resist our own power. We come up with reasons why that couldn't work or that wouldn't work where I am, and move to this framing on the right, that community power networked together can change the world. What we've done to do that is we've we've tried telling lots of stories, and what we've come to, and later on in the call, you can all give me pushback if you think this is wrong, but we've found that not all stories work the same. There are some stories that cut through better than others if you're trying to reach a broad audience. So the first thing we've done is create a filter to filter out the stories that don't land so well and focus on the ones that do. That's not to the detriment of those other stories, but it's to say if we're trying to build a bridge or a doorway for other people who haven't yet kind of got kind of drunk the Kool-Aid of this space, as it were, what would the stories we put front and center be, and if we got that right, which ones would we repeat? Different stories, but that have the same attributes that really quickly win people over to the power of this kind of movement and work. Even when we've done that, we found there was a lot that we had to get into those stories to make them land well with people. And so we've created a framework of what we feel we need to convey about the projects and about how they link into the wider space that will most quickly land the story with the broadest audience. And along the way, we've developed some principles of things we're trying to disprove. And so when we apply that, we're able to kind of filter stories and then tell those stories according to this framework. When we do that, we've tested this with the University of Bristol's psychology department. We've got 87% of people who have heard stories told in this way feel that they can make a significant difference to tackling social issues. And then you can see the other stats here on other related things. Would they tell their friends? Would they get involved themselves? We're about to do another round of testing to see if the latest iteration of what we're doing would improve on this and to do some more comparative studies. A lot of the work we've done so far has been on a shoestring, so we're doing our best to do the best combination of practical testing and real world and then academic testing. So some of this could be done more rigorously, I will be candid, but it was a positive response from our initial experiments. We've put some of these stories out in social media, so we've started.
Can I just jump in for a sec, Matt, just to check? Are you okay for us to send these slides around to everyone after
Yeah,
the
although I
session?
might tidy the deck up after this.
Yeah. So in the next day or two, we'll send you all these slides,
Yeah.
and just so everyone knows, basically, so Matt's talking about that filter there, and then the framework. The framework is the thing we're going to use later this evening, right? Matt, back to you.
Yeah, and I can slow down a little if needed. I'm trying to leave time for the practical bit. But we've got these stories out there in social media. So we've started channels on Instagram, TikTok. We're doing some stuff on LinkedIn and YouTube, but Instagram and TikTok are the main ones to try and get a feel for what's working. We've picked 8 stories from across the UK so far for our first pilot, and we've told each story in 4 different ways, from interviewing the people behind the project to get a really authentic from the horse's mouth, as it were, explanation of their own project. And then we've done 3 other variations for each project where we tell that story in different ways so that we're a little more in control of what we do and don't say and in what order, so that we can see what cuts through best. The kind of stories we're telling are Ambition Lawrence Western in Bristol, community who've come together to transform their local area and crowdfund the largest community-owned wind turbine in the UK. Repowering London, who are doing loads of great work about building community energy in London. Carrot Greengrocers in Northern Ireland, who've crowdfunded a greengrocer that only stocks local fruit and vegetables, and Civic Square in Birmingham, who I'm sure a lot of people are aware of, but trying to simplify their story because their story can be quite complex, but as creating a neighborhood fit for the future we're actually heading for. And it's going well in terms of the social media reaction. But that's only one measure of this. What we're trying to create is a framework that could help tell these stories in all spaces, whether that's film, TV, radio, podcasts, or in person. So, some of the time we all have to tell these stories to other people, and what we're trying to do is create the backbone of what would a good version of that story look like that we can test and then repeat, so that we're landing the stories most effectively. I'm going to skip through a little bit. We're at a point of now looking at how we can grow beyond social media. So we're looking at making a podcast, and we're talking to radio and TV and festivals. But what we really want to do is move on to this, because this is what I want to get feedback on. So I'm going to quickly talk through the filter and the framework. They're the 2 main things, and then we can apply those to people's stories on this call.
Matt, before you do that,
yeah,
can I ask you a question?
Yes, go for it.
Those of us who might be feeling like a bit sort of skeptical or not as clear, I don't want to assume that folks know about, for example, the Atlas Network and the organized way in which stories are told by certain people in our culture, in our politics, in our community. So I wonder if you could just share a little bit with us, because that's something you obviously know
Yeah, well, I
much more
guess
than.
yeah, the world that I've come from, I guess my background's in storytelling outside of just social issue space, but I've been working in this space for about 15 years, and it's become very clear that the people we're up against, including that awful report that came out in the press this morning from Tony Blair, but also, yeah, the reform crew and people who've got Trump into power, all of their messaging, although it sounds really simple, it's often like 3-word catchphrases, and it sounds almost like it just slipped out, rolled off their tongue, has been massively researched and tested, and they've been doing that for over 40 years. The bulk of the work that has led to the people being in power that we've got in the States right now started in the late 70s and early 80s, when they felt like society was going to the dogs, like same-sex marriage, people were taking drugs, it was like everyone was in the gutter to them. And so they started putting long-term funding into researching what narratives, what values, and what frameworks land with audiences. And what we're seeing now is the culmination of decades of testing and research through the Atlas Network, which is a network of think tanks around the world who test this on audiences, and then Tufton Street in the UK, who roll that out here with other think tanks. So when we hear it on the news and in the press, that is very well researched and tested narrative and values framing around the things we're getting. And it works, and it's incredibly, and I guess one of the outcomes that we feel, and I and the group of people I work with, is that it's actually frighteningly empathetic, because it has at least listened to and understood the values and concerns of the people it's speaking to. It's then selling them what I would argue, and I'm sure many would agree on this call, is not a valid solution, but it is speaking to an emotional reality of those people. And often when we put our stories across, we're not doing that. We haven't had that backbone of research. We haven't had that backbone of time testing things to see what lands, going and hanging out with people and telling the story 5 different ways and seeing which one resonates. So in some ways, what we're doing here is just scratching the surface with relatively limited funding of what the people whose stories are landing really well right now have been doing for decades.
Thank you, Matt. That's super helpful. I think this gives us all a sense of where you're coming from. And there's one question in the chat, which I think also is important to pick up, which is around perhaps like the flip side is around, getting traction on social media and trying to work with algorithms. Now, that is, of course, a very important, valid concern. How does that sit with the sort of stuff you're talking about? Is that something different, the same?
I'll keep it simple, because there's a lot of nuance in that. But really, we're not trying to learn how to play the algorithm. And so even though my background is in making viral films online, that is not the game here. Primarily because the algorithm is written to promote divisiveness. Like, if we wanted to do what I used to do and make these stories go viral, we could. But having listened and learned from lots of very smart framing and values and narrative practitioners over the last decade, it's fine. The penny's finally landed for me a few years ago that if we do that, we're just kind of creating more enmity and creating more problem down the line. What we need to do is work out how these narratives can pull people together. Whether that works with the algorithm is a different question, and we do need to learn how to make them cut through a bit. But I don't. What we're trying to do here is work out how do these narratives land with ordinary human beings, and then separately we will then work out how to translate that into playing the algorithm as best we can. But what we don't want to do is do it the other way around and play the algorithm, because we could do that, but the main way to do it would be by dividing us, and then you're never going to win over half the audience, so you've already lost half the battle from
Brilliant. So it's like level 1, let's back ourselves, let's get the right stories being told to each other by each other, and then level 2, when we're ready, let's see how we can help make social media work with us in order to support and amplify these things. Let's not start sort of arse over tit, excuse my language, by just trying to make the social media work. I can't believe I just said that. Anyway, okay. So maybe this is a good point for us, Matt, unless you feel there's anything else you really need to say. I wonder whether it's worth now getting everyone telling each other a story or two, and then we can see how you would approach it with your framework next.
Great, yeah.
So we're going to invite everyone into a breakout room. Now, you're going to be in a pair. If you don't want to join a breakout room because...
And a certain... certain theory. So I'm going to
Right.
explain that theory. And at the end, it would be really great to get feedback on whether you agree, whether you think this worked for you, whether you think we've got errors in it. This is an iterative framework that we're building to be useful to us. But the idea is this will be useful to others too. So first, the filter. We tried telling a load of collective action stories, and to make sure it's clear on our goal is to work out how would we share stories of collective action that's already underway that could lead to a better world, and land those with people so it really ignites in them the belief that collective action could create significant change. So we're trying to shift people from a position of, oh, this would be nice, but I don't know if it's going to fix big things, to absolute belief that their commitment to these kind of projects could make a tangible difference on them having a better future, their family, their friends, their children having a better future. So the first thing we're looking at is unexpected success. We're focusing on stories that have some element of unexpectedness. Firstly, that's just useful from a storytelling point of view if there's something surprising. But as we've done this, we've realized really what we're trying to do is find stories that unlock that pleasure of seeing a false norm disproved. So there are loads of false narratives we're surrounded with, that we're too small to make a difference, that you need to be in a position of power to make a difference, that you need money to make a difference. Ideally, we want stories that disprove as many of those false narratives as possible. And I have got a slide later on listing what we think those are. But so unexpected success is useful. We're focused on stories that address a universal need. We're finding that it's easier to land stories that connect with things people need to do at a systemic level every month. We don't frame it to them in that way, but we're focused on things that can affect food, housing, energy, transport, and decision making. And if I'm honest, transport we haven't done as much of because there isn't as much collective action outside of public transport on that issue. So it's the other four that we're most focused on. And that's because when we've tried telling stories around other things or things that feel like a plaster over a problem with the current system, they don't feel as powerful. And I guess one framing for me was when the power switched off in Spain and Portugal yesterday and nobody could do anything. I guess what we're really trying to do is find examples of stories where people have come together where you'd be really grateful in that moment. And so as an example, we don't do stories around recycling. We do stories around building new energy. It'd be really great if you'd switched on your energy system when everyone else's went off, but your recycling wouldn't really help you. So we're focused on those systemically change-making stories around essential monthly needs. We're focused on stories that are from humble beginnings because we find things ladder up the social strata, but they don't ladder down. If people without great means can do this, people with more can, but it doesn't work vice versa. We're focused on stories that can spread. We're not telling stories about coastal solutions which couldn't work inland and other things like that. A lot of this is kind of common sense, but it's not always applied with rigor. And so all we're really trying to do is hold ourselves to account of applying this rigor and then seeing if it improves the outcome. Can it be financially sustainable? That doesn't necessarily mean in a traditional capitalist model, ideally not, but it does mean that it's not dependent on taxpayer funding or an outside funding source that could be switched off. It ideally would have some mechanism. That doesn't have to be very present yet. It just has to not be clearly impossible from the start. So is it part of a movement? Most of these things are. And so it's just really mentioning that. And can I get involved? We're not telling any stories about technology solutions that you can't influence, that you can't get involved in, or stories that just wouldn't fit most people's lifestyle because they couldn't contribute. So that's the filter we've got, and that eradicates some stories, but we find that actually helpful because the ones we're left with tend to be the ones that resonate most with more people. And then when we've done that, we have a framework, and in simple terms,
Matt, in 10 seconds, how come health wasn't a systemic topic?
That is a good question, but most people, and we could add to this, we've focused on these because they're the ones that land most easily with limited means. We're very focused on, we've got not much time and money. How do we pick the ones that land the hardest? Health is slightly harder because it's a longer journey for people to connect their personal responsibility to this social outcome. Lots of people would see it that their way to influence health would be to influence the NHS, but then you're back into influencing systems of power. So we could do health.
Thank you. Great.
Yeah, but it's just a little bit trickier. In essence, what our framework is trying to do is this in three simple points: is make sure that the stories can ladder down to action you can take immediately, ladder up to systemic change. We don't want to tell any stories that couldn't affect systemic change, and ladder across to a movement that this is a part of, because that reduces the failure perception. if people see this as one story, they often feel like, yeah, it's great, but it's probably not going to work. Don't want to change society. Whereas if we make very clear that that is not the case, there are 500 others, 400 others, 999 others in the country doing this same kind of thing. That really bolsters people's belief because it takes the pressure off this one we've told them needing to work. Um, what we then do is we've broken that out. So this is the process that we are um, telling the story in, and this is what the framework I'll give you in a minute does. And this is slightly reverse engineered from both anecdotal evidence, trial and error, telling a load of people, and testing from other academics. But one piece of work that this was built with some reference to was an academic who studied that there is a sequential flow of information that people need when they hear a new story or idea, which, if broken, prevents them believing in the thing. And it's somewhat common sense. Basically, the thing is, do I care about it? If yes, go to. Do I think it could work in a practical way I understand? Not some hypothetical, like I've no idea, somebody told me this, but I don't understand it. But actual tangible, oh yeah, I believe that could work. A, B, C, great. Does it overcome something they think's worth overcoming? Do they believe other people will believe it too? That's really important. Do they believe those other people will act too? Because if they might believe everything so far, but if they think they're the only people who are going to do it, they're still going to be like, yeah, it's not going to work though. And then do they actually feel in some of all those motivated to do it? But the argument this academic made is that as a sequential thing that we all do so quickly we don't even realize we're doing it at any idea we are told. And if you drop a ball in that chain, you go, oh yeah, not going to work. So it's a bit of a tough thing to kind of hold ourselves to, but it made some intuitive sense to me. And when we tried telling the stories using this framework, it started working better. So what we open with is a values connection. So yeah, connect over shared values. So we care about this thing, yes, don't we? So we're creating a bond with the audience immediately. We then open with the visionary positivity. What is the exciting, amazing thing? And that this might sound obvious, but often this is done the other way around. Often we start with a problem. We're very focused on starting with the great idea, because there is academic research that your brain responds most powerfully and you frame everything subsequently around the first thing you hear. So we want the first thing they hear to be a great thing, a good thing, an exciting thing. Then we bring in after that, what is the crisis this is averting? And we're very focused there on not dwelling on that, not catastrophizing, just give some facts that remind the audience. We assume knowledge in the audience. We assume they've heard about this problem before and that they get it's probably an issue. We don't want to be educating them about the scale of the issue. We want to be reminding them about the significance of the issue in a quick way that just brings it into their mind. But we've already done the positive. So this is then just giving credibility to why it's important. We then make very clear that this is spreadable and ask the question, what would happen if more of us did this? We then visualize that future. So we give some information. What would it look like or feel like if we had this done everywhere? We then make very sure to mention the movement this is part of, for the reason I've already explained. We didn't do that when we started doing this, and then we realized it was stupid. Like it sounds so simplistic, but we know, as everyone on this call, that everything we're talking about is part of a movement, that there's loads of people doing this, but the people we're talking to don't necessarily. So holding ourselves to the rigor of just every time say it. Every story becomes stronger if every story references every other story that is in the same space. Because they're always calling out and reminding ourselves and the audience that there's loads of this going on, and then give people a way to get active. And that one is, again, really important. We can reach people with stories, but having done loads of viral campaigns, I mean, it would say there is some use in thinking about how this works in comparison to, say, marketing. So, and in a number of ways, but to give two examples, no marketer would consider that they would tell the story once and expect action. So we think this is part of the reason for creating this framework, is we believe that we need to find what works and repeat, repeat, repeat. But the same the way you would with an advert. You don't buy an iPhone after seeing one advert, having never heard about it before. But the other thing is you'd always know where you could go and act on that thing. And we don't want to have to re-find these people to tell them again how they can act. So we want to give them an action they can do straight away. We are taking the view that we want to give them more than one action, because otherwise people can feel corralled. And like everything we've done so far is to hoodwink them into doing this one thing, we think. And that's how normal campaigns work. And we found it can leave people feeling a bit kind of coerced. And so we give them options, an easy, medium, and a hard way they could get involved. but we do immediately give them an action. So that's the framework. And if I flick to here, this is that written out in a template that you can fill in for the stories you shared earlier. So the next stage, unless anyone's got any questions about that, the next stage
Let's go. Well, just while we do that, Matt, can you stick the link in the chat?
Yeah.
I've got the link for everyone. It's on the chat now.
Thank you, Tanya. So if folks want to make a copy of this Google document, if you open that link and make a copy for yourself, you'll have a copy of Matt's template. While you're doing that, Matt, was asking if there's any clarifying questions, anything, burning questions.
The one thing I'd say is obviously this is very formulaic. So we break our own rules occasionally. Like you can, to some extent, bend this a little, but we also find it useful to, the first thing we do is just fill this in. And then we look back at it, we take all the questions out and like smooth it a bit. But like, yeah, it is very rigid, but it's designed as a provocation.
So let's try it, Matt. Will you walk us through it? Get us working on it.
I know I'm going quite quickly, so if anyone does have questions or if I'm going too fast, do say. I'm just trying to fit it all into the time. We open with a hook, which has to do that values connection thing. There are lots of different ways to do that. And this bit, we are doing stuff on social media. So this is the one area where we are slightly pandering to that. But the hook, the most important thing about the opening is that you're creating a values connection with your audience. Well, actually, sorry, that the first part here, you could argue, is just the opener for social media. The second part is the bit where we're creating a values connection with the audience. The third part is where we outline the solution, and we want to do that in the simplest terms possible, using really common everyday language. We don't want to use jargon or words that are kind of within this movement. We want to say it in the way that anyone would understand. We then narrate the problem it's trying to overcome. We've broken our own rule in this example because we've used that a bit in the values thing. And you could argue we haven't done that brilliantly here. I had to grab this quickly last night. But yeah, we outline the problem. Then we talk about, in this outline, we talk about how it got started, because it can often feel quite confusing to people how they begin. So we take people right back to the beginning and give them just a little bit of information about how the thing got going. Then we talk about where it's at, like where is it now, what has been achieved. We then bring that onto what's the movement this is a part of. Then we talk about what would happen if that movement got going and we all did this. We've slightly reversed the order against our framework there, but this framework is for a social media post version of it, and it just works better that way around. And then we give them an example of how they could get started tomorrow. And the framing we use for ourselves on that is, what could you do next Saturday morning? Like, wait for the next weekend, but if you had an hour or two free, what could you do that would get you going? It can be quite small, but the idea is, behavior leads to belief, so get people moving and then they can expand from there. That's a very quick rundown.
So I wonder if, I'm just thinking maybe, Matt, we had a volunteer, there was someone, would you be up for working with someone to try and actually fill this in, just to give everyone a sense of how it's done, and then everyone, people in our own time can try and have a go ourselves? That's one option. If someone's got a story they feel like, I'd love to be able to tell this story, how would you help me, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, if anyone does, I can do that either now or in a breakout room or however's most useful.
Would someone be up for volunteering?
I would.
Yeah.
Hey, Julia, let's go.
Hey, Matt.
Great. So, Tamsin, if you could spotlight Julia.
Okay.
And then Matt. Yeah.
Well, do you want to start, Julia, and just start outlining your story, and then we can start customizing it into here?
Yeah, absolutely. Ask me questions as well, because I'm not sure if I'm outlining correctly. I recently, and this is a real story, this is why I jumped into the opportunity.
Can we just get rid of Matt's screen so we can see you two rather than the screen? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. I recently applied to be an organizer of the Climathon, which is a hackathon for climate in Liverpool, where I'm based. So we got accepted. It's going to be in October. I got really excited when I found out about this because 3 years ago I was already ideating with myself and a few colleagues from industry that I would love to host a hackathon of different sectors. So bringing together private, public, education, and third sector all together to brainstorm solutions on a local level that are actionable, and then create activations throughout the year, starting potentially with a manifesto that we all co-create, everything co-created and everything. And why not then driving something into more innovation where, okay, when we decided of a challenge, we then engage more with educational sectors and all of that, and say whoever creates a solution, like kind of do a little bit of a competition even on that. But that is like more towards developing the idea further. But the first action is literally bringing everyone together to understand the systems, understand what we need to change, and co-create solutions on a local level together from different sectors of society here on a local level.
Okay, and so quickly going back, so it's a hackathon is the key thing, yeah?
Yes, it's a climate hackathon.
And the action you're looking for, is it across all of society, or is it are you looking for tech solutions, or is it hackathon?
No, across all of society. I think the first thing is defining on a local level, co-creating, co-understanding on a local level, what are the priority challenges that we need to tackle all together first, and then co-creating solutions from a systematically changing level, understanding the systems, and then what do we need to change about them, but all together. And then from that, unraveling opening opportunities for then engaging with educational sector, tech, or whichever other sectors, and say, okay, this is the challenge on a local level that we decided that is the most urgent. Then create some sort of a program where people come together to try and ideate a few solutions, and whoever wins, say, gets the funding to go and develop it together, but being something that is very diversified, the involvement, not just being a tech, team, or a public sector, governmental oriented, initiative. It being literally cross sector.
Great. Okay, cool. Let's go. So this is pretty intense, but I'm going to try and do this live. So no, it's good. So, but I'd start. We've got to get people in really quickly.
Yep.
And so this might not be quite perfect, but I'd start with something like, you've heard of hackathons for software. What if we hackathon society? So you hook people in with an idea. Now, not everyone's going to get that, but I'm trying to make it as broad as we can in a hurry. Then we'd go into talk like it's already happening. This group in Liverpool, did you say Liverpool?
Yes, Liverpool, yeah.
Are doing just that. So this is already up and running. I'm not going to fill in the problem it's overcoming in much detail, because that it's too broad for us to do
Absolutely.
that with meaning right now. But we'd pick something that was going to overcome.
Yeah.
I think that what we then want to do in the second half is connect that with the more general rise in participative democracy, because this is one way to gather the opinions of many people to do things. So that's the movement I think we'd be wanting to join it up with towards the back end. And this is an imaginative way to do that, which could be seen as really helpful, because people are starting to hear about citizens' assemblies and things, but not everyone will gel with every idea. So we want to have a plurality of ideas out there. So this could be a really great alternative way into that narrative of participative democracy. So that's where we'd probably want to weave it into in the second half. And along the way, we'd need some tangible, practical things. So you have spoken about some of those. You've spoken about this combination of private, public sector, education, third sector. So I think we'd want to maybe speak to that. But probably the most, I think the way we would lean into doing that would be to speak to the human in all of those. So because people can't control what another organization, organizations across the city are beyond their control. What we're trying to do is shape the story so that, I'll take feedback at the end, but we're trying to shape the story so it feels like you could have agency over doing it. And as a human within an organization, or within the education sector, or within the third sector, private sector, public sector, wherever you are, we want to speak to that part of people. So we would try and frame the language in that middle bit so that we were making it feel like people from all these places are coming together to do this thing, because that frames it around the agency that people had, rather than that they were told by their boss to, or they were allowed by their employer or their council to do it. because that it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you frame it so, then the people will go and ask. They're like, oh, other people. It implies other people from these organizations are already doing it off their own back. I want to do it off my own back. And so our hope would be that would change the way that people were liberated to do it. They'd go and ask their boss, everyone's coming together for this thing. Can I be part of it? Rather than waiting to be told. So that's a really quick one. I haven't actually filled it in, but does Dave?
I'm filling it in as we go. So I guess all that we're missing, we're doing really good. This is rapid fire. Here's how they started. Something about how it originated. Like,
we'd keep that really down to earth. So the starting point for us is always pub, cafe, kitchen. Like, where did people meet that is like
Julia? Well, tell us, Julia.
Pub, cafe, or where?
Pub, cafe, kitchen. But like, it could be that you met in somewhere people have access to that the first meeting happened. So you could be like, the first thing was they met up for a Saturday afternoon in X.
Yeah, cool. Cafe then. Saturday afternoon screams cafe to me, and I don't drink. So
well, how did it happen, Julia? I mean, did you meet up at a cafe? Yeah, cool. Okay.
That's my favourite Matt Golding line. If you want to make change, put the kettle on.
And like, and how's it going? Like, where you've got to? You need to give us some like.
Okay, so I've just started. So it's gonna be the first one in Liverpool. I just got accepted. So interestingly enough, Liverpool was going to have a Liverpool Climate Week in June, and the Climathon, the days for the Climathon would be October, which is great. So there is other movements, and I know the people organizing. So, you know, I'm going to meet them on Friday to tie up things, you know, see how can we tie things up. So I just started, I'm actually going through all of the documentation that they share and everything. I think the idea is to start something in October, kickstart in October, but do a year-long activation of it, you know, with different workshops going on.
Right.
You
so
know, keep
it's happening. We've got a date. Come along. Matt.
Yes, on the week of the 6th of October.
I don't know if this is a helpful thought, but like the way what we would do at this point is tell the story. Like, imagine yourself into the future. What do you want? Like, tell the story we want to tell. We can work back to build how we get there. But like, I don't know. It's your story, and I'm plucking this out the air. But imagine that the education board for the city and the council and the public, like members of the public who'd come to do it, had agreed together to make Liverpool the standout. That they were going to hack their way to, I don't know, carbon neutral by X date. That's not very good. But like, do you get my point? Like, what could
I get it.
we want to have already happened that we write into the story at this point?
The good thing is it aligns with the city agenda, but I think it doesn't, you know, I've seen so much because I've worked cross-sector, okay? I've worked in the educational sector, I've worked in the private sector, I've worked in the public sector, and I'm now working with the third sector. And I said, Jesus Christ, people are very bad at communicating with each other. You know, like letting them know what everyone's doing. And what I tend to do is that silos here are trying to solve the same problem. So this is why I appreciate what Joan is trying to say. It's like, we are together, we're stronger. Don't try to do everything by yourself, because there's no communication of what's going on, or, you know, or the channels in which are communicated are not accessing everybody. Not at least everyone that wants to get involved. They're not having, you know, so there is a disconnect. So for me, it's about bridging those silos first, getting a general awareness. And then, okay, from now we co-create something that we bring all the strengths together, and how can we move forward from that on a collective? Because it's the collective that's going to make the change, not individuals simply.
Thanks, Julia. Amazing. So I'm going to put a link back in the chat where I've tried to write what Matt said and some of what you've said. It's like the roughest, most basic starter for 10. But I think what's come out in the wash there, Matt, is a few really important points you've made. And I see there's also some stuff in the chat on Zoom. Like, this is super practical stuff. I'm just looking at the time, and I want to flip back. If anyone needs to leave when we hit the hour, just please go ahead and do that. But otherwise, we're going to be here for probably another 5 to 10 minutes. Because Matt wants to hear how this stuff is landing, and I want to leave space for that. And I'm sure some of us are happy to engage with you, Matt, around that. So, Julia, here's in the chat. I'm going to put this, and then if anyone, Matt,
have you put in the chat?
I'm doing it now.
Okay.
Thanks for doing that, Matt.
Thank you.
Being up for it. Thanks, Julia, for volunteering.
Well, yeah, but what do people think? Does this feel too constraining? Do the points feel right? Is there anything missing? Like, we are really open to feedback. I am really open to feedback.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go for
Can
it.
you
Go
hear me?
on, Roger. Yeah.
I really like this. I'm involved in a huge project worldwide, radical change, political change, and I spend, excuse my French, bloody hours trying to get the wording just right. And I really like that there's a framework here. My question is around, this is very short, sharp, to the point, and it's meant for a 30-second video. Would that be fair?
No, it's actually meant for 2-minute videos, but yeah, sure.
2 minute video, okay, but a short video.
Yeah.
And my thing is, how can I, and I'm not a unique person in how can I get all the details into a short story type of thing. So this framework is really helpful for me. Thank you.
Well, that's great.
I'll play with it.
Great. Well, and if you play with it and get thoughts as you do so, do feed them back. But I guess brevity is a really key thing here. And I guess the motivation for that is not to say that the stories have to always be brief. If we have more time, we can get into the nuance. But when you see people like Reform stand on stage and say in 30 seconds something that moves the country, we've got to be able to do that for this, is the position we're coming from. So
right.
That's the thought. It's like, how do you get people excited and to believe when you don't have much time? Because if we can't do that bit, it's very hard to bring more people into the movie.
Yeah, gotcha.
So there's a question.
How do we get hold of you?
My email is matt@rubberrepublic.com. I'll just put it in the, in the chat.
Matt, there's a question from Jen in the chat. Do you think that this structure works no matter the channel or the format? Like in person, is it?
Yes, it should do, but that's where we want feedback. So we are using it in person at the moment, and it does work. But I mean, basically, it does work. So you're going to have to customize elements of it for different contexts, but we want to create it so that it's the backbone that you can intuitively bend from for different formats. So yes, it should do. So treat it like it does, and if it doesn't, tell us why.
Kim, go for it.
Yeah, hi, thank you, and thanks for this. I also find it very inspiring. So first of all, congrats on that. I just have one thing that I've noticed when I've seen some of your videos actually on Instagram, I think, and also on LinkedIn. And I'm based myself in Portugal at the moment, and I felt really like, okay, I'd like to start doing something, but how would I start in my context? And of course, you're not, you don't need to be doing the work for every country or whatever. But I felt like, is there anything that can perhaps be put in the notes or something that could be trying to speak to those people that are in a different context and that might want to get something started that is inspired by this, but don't have, like, I don't know. I'm not sure there is a possibility of that, but that is one reason why I haven't necessarily immediately been able or been feeling like I could do something, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, we do want to do that. So we've got two caveats to what we're doing so far. We've only been able to do it in the UK, but this should translate to anywhere. We just don't have the funding to focus on anywhere else. And we haven't been able to build like half of the project that we're trying to build. There are 3 pillars to what we're trying to do: inspire people with stories that fit this framework, give them more information about how they got started. We're finding that to convert people into action, you got to get them excited first, and then they do want to know, like, okay, tell me how they did it. Like, and that is a process of belief. Like, I want to hear what they actually did so I can build in myself the muscle that I believe I could do that. So that's where we're trying to make a podcast at the moment, where we go and hear those stories. And then you need to find something near you. So we're trying to build a map where you can put your postcode in. Some maps exist, but we can't find one. So we're going to try and build one where you can get systemically change making collective action stories near you. and if there aren't any, a one-page PDF of how to get started. Because we've spoken to lots of other community organizations, and they're often stretched, they don't have money, but we've talked to them. And if you had a page that just went like, to do a community energy project, you need to find this many people, a piece of land, some people locally that are going to come and help you, etc. And when you've done that, you could then connect with a community who've already done it. That makes it easier.
Maybe just add the function of put your email here if you want to join an initiative, but you don't have those connections yet, because that would be an amazing
really
way
good.
to sort of already
Yeah.
connect people.
Also,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking to John now. We're trying not to replicate bits of the space that exists. So we need to work out how to dovetail this in. We don't want to build all of it. We want to build the storytelling Hoover, and then connect it into the you know, this group and the Discord that's associated. And so we don't want to replicate too much. But yeah, it's a good point, and it's really good feedback that what you would like is something you can do that is it right to say you'd like something you can do that you could put in that, you know, we're going to contact you back, or
Well, yes, or at least that I could check if, you know, I see that I would like to do something here, and if there are other people out there, I'd like to connect to them, but I don't know how to reach them or how to, you know, because I can't necessarily do everything on my own. I have a full-time job, I have a daughter, etc. So it's not, you know, something I can just go ahead maybe and start myself. But if there was a group I could join, then that would be different. So kind of making that connection easier.
I think we can do some on that, but I'm again mentioning John, but also Just Friday's on this call and is building Connection Engine, and there are various things, and I think we need to knit them together. But yeah, it's really good to hear that that's what you want, and we will try and work out how we can collectively make that happen.
Matt, I think we've probably got time for like 2 more questions. So I can just see there's something in here. There's a question from Polly about, are people interested in stories of history, enduring spirit, the past, or is it better to focus on the utopian future?
Well, so I again, a lot of this is just what we've found, and so feel free to challenge. But there's 2 important things there. One is, yes, we, in an ideal world, if we had more funding as well as everything I've just said, we would be building these stories in the past, the present, and the future. But the future shouldn't be utopia. We're being very careful. We are building some things about visualizing the future. We've tested stuff to do with things like solar punk, and it doesn't work. If you present a future that looks fantastical, people just don't believe it. So we're looking at how we can use Unreal Engine to map changes onto real world footage, so the future looks a bit like today, but with some changes, because it's believable then. There's a huge chunk of audience who do believe we need to make this change, but don't know how to do it and don't believe it's going to happen. And that's what we've got to overcome, make it believable. So the future, yes, but we think we need to do it with care. And then the past, yeah, remind us that collective action is always what's led to great change. There's this flaw, I think, in our thinking that we look to politicians and we look to business leaders and R&D labs of corporations to build the future, and that they're not going to build the future any of us want. They're only going to build a future that's profit making for them. It's not going to solve half of the opportunity we have, would not even be countenanced in an R&D lab because there's no profit potential. So we need to remind people that that's not really how the future happened anyway. That's not how the present happened anyway. That's not how we got here. So yes, things like how we came together to solve the ozone layer, how we built the NHS, but there are many more examples. But yes, the reminders of those are powerful too, so that it doesn't it reduces the pressure on these stories to be doing something unique that's never been done before. That's not true. This is always how change happens.
And perhaps the last one, I'm just going to put it out there. If anyone wants to just unmute and ask or offer a bit of feedback to Matt or ask a direct question. I know there's a load in the chat, so take your chance.
I'm just going to abuse privilege then and say I think it's great. I mean, I think there's a couple of things I would sort of underline. I think the fact that you bring the positive first, but you don't ignore the challenge, I think is a really helpful thing to do. And I think a few people have commented about like the conventional way we're told to tell stories is like problem, agitation, solution, and that's very unhelpful. I think when all the attention goes to the problem first, and I really want to underline the way you called that out. I think that's really powerful. And then for me, the thing that I personally think is the biggest build on how I'm telling stories is the not just the shift to, not just the emphasis on what can I do next Saturday, which I think is a really lovely frame. The next Saturday point is the specificity of that is really good. It's not so much what can I do this evening or tomorrow, but next Saturday I find very helpful. But also the fact that the bridge to that is what's the wider movement. And it makes me think, one of the stories I tell a lot is the story of East Marsh United and Grimsby. But I'm catching myself that I haven't usually referred to community land trusts and what their whole thing about creating a community share offer to buy 10 of the houses on a street. For those who don't know it, read my damn book, people. But but to bridge from there to community land trusts, or how community share offers operate more broadly, and how much money has been raised in community share offers and how people are using them, and then to there's probably something in your area or whatever, I think is really good. So there's a like 2 or 3 really useful bits for me, and I would like to consider myself someone who does this reasonably well, at least. So yeah.
Thanks, John. Yeah, and in that spirit, I think also building Matt offered that great idea of easy, medium, and hard. What's like an easy, medium, hard you could do? So thinking exactly of that East Marsh United Community Land Trusts, what's an easy thing I could do next Saturday, a medium thing I could do, a hard thing I could do. There's something for everyone in there. You don't need to become an expert, but you can find a bit where you can join a wider movement at the level that works for you. Now, I feel on that note that we've done our best. Matt, you've got so much to offer and talk about, and this has been a really short amount of time. Thanks everyone who stayed with us for an extra 10 or so minutes. We will share around, hopefully you've copied the framework and you can play with it in your own time. We'll also share around the slides in the next couple of days, and any other bits and pieces that come out of this. Matt, a huge thank you from us for coming along and getting involved.
Thank you all for coming.
I think, unless anything else, Tanya, is there anything that we're missing or that needs to be said?
I don't think so, unless Tamsin's got any sort of announcement.
Yes.
I think just from a wider citizen collective point of view, just watch this space. We're nearing the end of our current phase, and we're hoping to bring the community back together at some point in May to kind of talk about and collaborate on what comes next. And we will email out through both our mailing list and John's mailing list on that. So hopefully you are all on that mailing list. I will drop the link in the chat now for anybody that is new, but and we will circulate it all around on there. But yeah, thank you, Matt. That's been really, really insightful. And also just in terms of the recordings, I know quite a few people contacted me before to say that they couldn't actually attend. We will edit out kind of any of the more personal bits that were discussed. None of the breakout rooms were recorded, and we'll circulate those for everybody as well.
Great.
Thank you, everyone. And
do things, people. Easy and medium, hard things in the world. Go.